Hey, welcome back to Brighter Rays. We're looking at Colossians 4, verse 5. Today this is called Walk, right? Or Walking. So when it comes to our dealings with those outside the church, we are to be wise. Jesus said that we should see ourselves as sheep in the midst of wolves. You know, they want to eat you. Keep that in mind, because we also are to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. Now, my wife and I are often reminding our kids that we cannot expect unbelievers to act like Christians. This is part of being wise before outsiders. We need to remember whom we're dealing with and that we once were outsiders ourselves. We act differently with those who are in the church than we do with those who are outside the church. We don't yoke ourselves with the worldly. We don't invite false teachers into our churches or even our homes. We need to understand that people will be lovers of self, lovers of money, proud, arrogant, abusive, disobedient to parents, ungrateful, unholy, heartless, unappeasable, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not loving good, treacherous, reckless, swollen with conceit, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having the appearance of godliness but denying its power. Now that's the world that's around us, and we see that all the time. Nothing's changed. It was the same in Paul's day as it is today. That's how people are. Proud, pride, arrogant, walking down the street and being prideful and arrogant and abusive. And parents are not obeyed. People are ungrateful. They just think they deserve everything. They don't have self-control. I mean, some of the things that people are doing, they don't want self-control. They've thrown off all self-control. So, so all those things you see, and that was going on in Paul's day. That's what's going on today. That's how people are. People are lovers of self. He said there would be a day coming, and I think he was talking about his day, because obviously people were like that back then too. People haven't really changed. We look at our culture in America and like, oh, look how bad it's gotten. Yeah, for a long time we were blessed with a better culture. It wasn't good. It wasn't holy. It wasn't blessed by God. It wasn't, it wasn't really God honoring. But at least it gave the nod to God, right? It's like, yeah, God's there. And we'll still do whatever we want. We just won't be as brazen. Now you got people just do it out in the open, which is really the difference. I mean, people were doing stuff behind the scenes, and if it wasn't one sin, it's a different sin, right? People sin. Some of them are done out in the open. Some of them now it's just okay in our culture to do sins out in the open. People have always been doing it. It's not that big of a difference. So, so I mean, we might consider different things as like, oh, it's being a lot worse or whatever, but that's all relative, and it's all subjective too. Because what's worse? What's worse to me might not be worse to someone else. What's worse to me may not be what's worse to God. So again, it's subjective. We have to be careful about making dogmatic statements about, oh, it's worse than it was the other day, or worse than it was 20, 50 years ago. Yeah, okay, that's subjective. Worse for who, to who, whom, I don't know. So we need to be careful with making, especially dogmatic statements about that, but be careful what we say, because it may not be so. But we need to seize the opportunities, is what Paul talks about. So the phrase making the best use of time or redeeming the time is often taken out of context here. This is not really about being busy all the time and not being lazy. In its context, this is about sharing the gospel with outsiders. So if you have dealings with outsiders, then share the gospel with them. There are a million ways that this can be done. Some people share the gospel with those who hire, that they hire to work in their house, or some people give out tracts or leave them around for people to find. Some people share the Bible all over the internet. You make use of the opportunities. You make use of the open doors to preach the gospel as God has given to you. That's what Paul was asking. He wasn't asking, well, I don't know what decision to make. So can God open a door or close the door? Whenever it talks, people use that phrase in reference to that. But whenever the Bible talks about open doors, it's talking about the ability to preach the gospel. Not about making decisions like, I need an open door and closed door to make these decisions. I got two decisions I need to make. Which one do I do? God, open the door for me. That's not how that phrase is used. We use that. He's saying the open door for the gospel, to preach the gospel, to be able to share the gospel with people. That means he has the opportunity to do so. And then verse 6 here of Colossians is coming up next. So we're going to talk about that next time. And we're going to talk about how God, or as Christians, we need to speak. So kind of already walked the walk, how we walk. And then we're going to, looking for opportunities is how we walk. Walking wisely. Next, we're going to talk about speaking. How we speak.